Welcome back. Much reaction this morning to the killing of Iran's top military commander, including from Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who tweeted this: "We are outraged the president would assassinate a foreign official, possibly setting off another war without congressional authorization, and has zero plan to deal with the consequences. But of course, you know that," writes Ilhan Omar. Joining me right now is Texas Congressman John Ratcliffe. He sits on the House Judiciary, Intelligence, and House Homeland Security Committees. He is also a former federal prosecutor. And Congressman, it is always a pleasure to see you. Thanks very much for joining me.
Good morning, Maria.
Well, as the House gets ready to watch what takes place next in terms of an impeachment trial, we now have this pushback from critics of the president about the killing of Soleimani. Your reaction?
Well, it's disappointing, but it's not surprising. You just mentioned Congresswoman Omar and her tweet. Think about what she said when 3,000 Americans were killed by terrorists on 9/11. Recently, she said, "Some people did something." When the United States kills a terrorist, her response is she's outraged at assassinating a foreign leader. Maria, this was not a foreign leader. This was a designated terrorist. And do you know who designated him a terrorist? The Obama administration. So, you know, it may be a new year and it may be a new decade, but it's the same vindictive, progressive, socialist mob that wrongfully impeached the president at the end of last year, and they're starting off where they left off.
Nancy Pelosi is sitting on those articles of impeachment. She's not sending them over to the Senate yet. I imagine she's looking for more dirt on President Trump or whatever she's doing. Could she use this, the takedown of a terrorist, as another article?
Well, she can, because she has the votes there. Very clearly, they just wrongfully impeached the president on 2 articles. They could certainly try to do the same thing with the 3rd. But, you know, the American people see through this. They know that this was political. It always was. You know, there's a reason, Maria, that at the same time Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff and Jerry Nadler on December 18th were saying, we can't wait a single day more. We've got to impeach this president right now, that down the hall, Senator Schumer was already saying, we can't have a Senate trial without more evidence and more testimony, because he knew it was going to be dead on arrival over in the Senate, and it will be. And that's why, despite that professed urgency on December 18th to impeach right now with everything we need, it's now been almost 3 weeks and she hasn't taken any action. She's let that progressive, socialist, democratic mob walk her into a box canyon. She's put a gun to her own head, and she's looking for Mitch McConnell to give her a way out, and he's not going to do that.
I want to ask you what an impeachment trial will look like, and how the two sides will defend their sides, because, of course, we're expecting Adam Schiff to be one of the House representatives on the Democrat side. But a couple of weeks ago, your colleague, the Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, joined us here on this program. Here's what he said about the president needing his own support. Watch this.
You don't get managers on the Republican side, but the president could have representation, that he's probably going to hire an attorney to represent him. Maybe he uses the White House. But I believe he should have help from the House, these individuals that have worked through this, that could give advice and others. I would go to John Ratcliffe, former U.S. attorney that has done an amazing job.
Congressman, will you be representing the president in an impeachment trial?
Well, I don't think the president and White House counsel have made any final decisions about a Senate defense team, because we don't even know if there's going to be a Senate trial. I can tell you this, is I've had discussions about being a resource in whatever way can be allowed and authorized to do that. This was an unconstitutional impeachment. It was an assault on due process. It was an assault on the separation of powers. So anything I can do to uphold my obligation to defend the Constitution, limit the damage that the Democrats have done, I'm certainly prepared and willing to do that.
So what is the president's defense at this point, then? Tell us what that looks like in terms of a Senate trial, hypothetically speaking, that she does send the articles over within the next week and a half.
Well, I just listened to Senator Graham talk about how it should proceed. To remind your viewers what happened during the Clinton impeachment, senators voted 100 to nothing to proceed under what are called the Clinton rules. Chuck Schumer was one of those 100. So there was a unanimous decision about how this should proceed and how it would be fair. Chuck Schumer is now pointing to those same rules, calling them absurd and saying they would be unfair. I think that Senator Graham outlined what should happen. She should transmit the articles of impeachment. There would be opening statements. There would be presentations by the House managers and by the president's defense team. Senators would be allowed to ask questions of each side, and then the senators would decide whether or not there would be a need for any additional testimony or evidence. But this is supposed to be based on the House record, and the Democrats had every opportunity to call any witness that they wanted, and for them now to say we need more evidence and more testimony really shows that what a constitutional scholar and Democrat Jonathan Turley said was just absolutely accurate. This was the thinnest, fastest, weakest impeachment in U.S. history, and to proceed along the lines they did was an abuse of Congress.
And yet, it once again has taken all the oxygen out of the room. I mean, you know, we have sat here for now 3 years, Congressman, you and me, coming on this program virtually every Sunday, talking about the abuse at the top of the FBI in 2016. We now know, based on the IG report, we now know, based on a criminal investigation undergoing in John Durham's office, that there was wrongdoing, possibly criminal wrongdoing, and yet the Democrats are not even acknowledging this. So where do we stand on that? And do you think there's going to be accountability, knowing that there was abuse at the FISA court, knowing that there was leaking and lying under oath?
I do. I think there is going to be accountability. I think that sometimes justice delayed is not justice denied. I told your viewers repeatedly that John Durham couldn't act until the Inspector General Michael Horowitz issued his report. When he issued that report with those damning findings against the FBI and the Department of Justice and folks there tampering with evidence to continue a counterintelligence investigation wrongfully against first candidate Trump and then against a sitting president, John Durham came out that day and said he agreed with a lot of what the Inspector General had in terms of findings of fact, but disagreed with whether or not there was a proper predicate to begin this. Now we come up with evidence that's recently been reported that one of the folks that John Durham talked to was an embassy official who reached out to George Papadopoulos 3 months before Crossfire Hurricane was ever opened. That's a sign that John Durham is looking at the fact that this may include Obama administration officials beyond law enforcement, perhaps to include our intelligence community, folks like John Brennan. And, you know, based on his reputation and his prior work, I have every confidence that John Durham will help share the truth with the American people, and they'll get a better picture of really how the Democratic administration before this one targeted President Trump and was aided by Democrats who paid for Russian disinformation to try and frame this president before he ever got into office.
Well, it's pretty extraordinary, the fact that for 2.5 years, John Brennan was all over TV on MSNBC and CNN saying that President Trump committed treason. And now we know that John Durham is looking at the communication of John Brennan. And whether or not the direction came from John Brennan to put all of these spies and informants and attachés, if you will, across the world, getting them to go meet with people like George Papadopoulos and Carter Page, who were on President Trump's team.
Right. Foreign officials at our U.S. embassies overseas going to meet with a campaign official for the Trump campaign, not in their official capacity, but the explanation that they give is just out of personal curiosity. It's not their job, but beyond that, it doesn't make any sense. Look, here's what I can tell your viewers is, you know, Trey Gowdy and I were the only Republicans that were allowed to see all of the classified documents back during the FISA abuse investigation. And at that time, we both saw documents that reflected that John Brennan and Jim Comey gave conflicting testimony about the Steele dossier. Brennan says Comey was pushing the Steele dossier to be included in the intelligence community assessment. Comey says that it was Brennan that was pushing it. They both testified under oath before Congress and to investigators to that fact. They both can't be telling the truth. Those are the things that John Durham is focusing on. And again, I'm confident that justice delayed is not justice denied. There'll be a full accounting. I certainly hope there will be. Congressman,
thank you. And thank you for exposing the truth over these years. We so appreciate your time this morning, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
Congressman John Ratcliffe joining us.